One of the things in that documentary that I wanted to ask you about was his process in going after the My Lai Massacre. And this is a huge story. And let me explain to people who don't understand. The note I wrote down, I did not have the privilege of growing up in a country that was self-assured of its own moral superiority, as we supposedly were in World War II. I grew up I grew up, one of my first earliest memories is of John F. Kennedy being assassinated. But the My Lai Massacre in 68 was huge, leading to protest songs. I mean, leading to politicians changing course, ultimately leading to Westmoreland being kicked out, LBJ going away, Richard Nixon coming into office. Good Lord. But that particular story, I cannot even adequately describe for people who weren't alive then how huge that was and what an impact it made. I remember because of that, our next door neighbor, who was of draft age, left the country, fled the country, did not want to be part of that. And while his father had served in the military, while he was not a draft dodger per se, he was brought up, went to military school, for God's sakes, wanted to serve the country, but did not want to serve a military that was killing innocent babies, baby killers. And when many of them came back from Vietnam, even if they had nothing to do with that, were spit on and were called baby killers in isolated cases. So it was, I can't explain how much that story moved us and how big it was. It started with a tip. That's it. And tracking down that tip as the curmudgeonly reporter was something that changed history. And I think, and I wanted to ask you, as a teacher, how do you impart those skills to students?
I think I always, there's a handful of famous cases of good journalism that I always highlight. And this is one of them, the My Lai Massacre. And kind of like you said there, I was trying to put into context that Americans were caught off guard by that. Like in the era we grew up now, it's a post-Church Committee, post-Vietnam era. A lot of this stuff is known. It wasn't even, I mean, even JFK's affairs weren't known. I mean, the country was so innocent in a lot of ways at that time. But for the students I talk to today, I point out that's really the legacy you want to leave behind. Nobody remembers like the Twitter wars you had with the person in power, or the kind of one like gotcha question about some personal issue. It's that deep investigative reporting that really is what we remember historically, and it's what changes the way the country operates. And so I think that needs to be the goal if you're going to get into this profession, is to go for those types of stories versus the kind of fodder of personalities that we see so often dominate the news media coverage.
And yeah, and that's a criticism we can make. And the problem is that even if you're doing your job as an investigative reporter, they will deflect and flip that on you and go, you're just in it for yourself. You want to get your name, you want to get, yeah. And the thing is no, honestly, that's not what you want. You want to hold those in power accountable. Now, if that puts you, that shouldn't make you the story. But in the effort of shooting the messenger, they often do flip it. And because of that, I think there are young reporters who don't understand the nuance of doing the job. You're not drawing attention to yourself. However, if attention is drawn to yourself, you have to stand your ground and ask questions.